Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a clinical, step-by-step deconstruction of what was, frankly, a catastrophic security breach. We're looking at the recent attempted assassination of President Trump at the Washington Hilton during the White House Correspondents' Dinner. We're going to map out exactly how a suspect managed to bypass some of the absolute heaviest security on the planet. And the crazy part? He didn't do it by breaking through a wall. He did it by simply already being inside the building.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to cover targeting the line of succession, the unlikely insider threat, the hotel residency loophole, the 7-second engagement, and finally, assessing the security failure.
Section 1. Targeting the line of succession. The stakes at the Washington Hilton.
To really grasp the gravity of this breach, we've got to understand the sheer scale of the White House Correspondents' Dinner. 12. That's a massive number here. Why? Because that is the number of individuals sitting in that ballroom who were in the constitutional line of succession to the presidency. Think about that for a second. Out of the top 18 people who would lead the United States in a crisis, 12 of them, plus the president himself, were all concentrated in this one single room. Having that much executive power packed into one place creates an absolutely existential security challenge.
And they weren't exactly alone in there. There were literally 2,500 guests packed into that ballroom. Imagine the scene. Plates clattering, conversations buzzing. It's a massive, massive logistical operation. Now, the Hilton has hosted this dinner for decades, using a security protocol that honestly hasn't changed much in all that time. But as we're about to see, relying on a static, decades-old playbook against a patient, modernized threat, well, it can have devastating consequences.
Section 2. The unlikely insider threat. Profiling suspect Cole Allen.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the suspect himself. The idea we have of an assassin is usually pretty dramatized, right? But the reality of 31-year-old Cole Allen is what makes this whole thing so chilling. On paper, this guy had literally zero traditional criminal behavioral red flags, none. He was a star student, an award-winning teacher from the LA area. But underneath that completely professional veneer was this incredibly patient, lethal logistical planning. Right after the president announced he was attending back in early March, Allen booked his hotel room on April 6th. He then traveled all the way across country by train to totally avoid airport security, and he was armed with a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, a .38 semi-automatic handgun, 3 knives, and a pair of pliers. And just to be clear, those weapons were legally purchased back in 2023. His explicit, pre-calculated intent was to target the president and as many high-ranking cabinet officials as possible.
Section 3. The hotel residency loophole. Bypassing the perimeter.
So how on earth does someone with a shotgun and a handgun get within striking distance of the president? Well, it essentially boils down to a massive failure in a core defensive strategy known as concentric circles of security. If you're not familiar, this is a standard protocol that uses multiple layers of physical perimeters, almost like rings on a target, to protect VIPs from outside threats. The glaring problem here? That entire strategy assumes the threat is coming from the outside trying to force their way in. But what happens when your security posture is completely static and outward-facing, but the threat is literally already residing inside the innermost circle?
And this brilliantly and terribly illustrates the problem. The suspect did his own pre-operational surveillance and found a huge procedural flaw. This is an actual quote from an email he scheduled to send his family right before the attack. He wrote, "I walk in with multiple weapons and not a single person there considers the possibility that I could be a threat. The security at the event is all outside because apparently no one thought about what happens if someone checks in the day before." He saw exactly how vulnerable those concentric circles were when dealing with a multi-day hotel residency.
The mechanical execution of this was terrifyingly simple. The suspect checked into the hotel on Friday, April 24th, literally the day before the dinner. By doing that, he established residency inside the venue before the Secret Service even set up their full exterior screening net. Then, on Saturday night, he just walked right out of his 10th floor room, popped into a restricted stairwell located just steps away from his door, and walked all the way down directly to the terrace level. He effectively completely bypassed the primary security net just by being an internal resident.
Section 4. The 7-second engagement, the breach and response. When a static perimeter like that is breached from the inside, the shift from everything is fine to total chaos happens in the blink of an eye. Let's look at the exact timeline. At 8:03 p.m., Allen takes a selfie in his room. He's in a black dress shirt, red tie, wearing a shoulder holster, geared up with his weapons, ammo, and pliers. 8:15 p.m., he leaves that 10th floor room and slips into the stairwell. 8:27 p.m., still hiding in that stairwell, He actually pulls out his Samsung smartphone and brings up a live broadcast of the dinner so he can track his targets in real time. He maintained complete tactical awareness right up until he launched his assault.
What happened next was a blindingly fast 7-second sequence. Allen burst through the double doors. He races right past a security checkpoint and a magnetometer at full speed, totally neutralizing that last technical barrier. He fires off a single blast of buckshot, injuring a Secret Service officer at point-blank range. That agent immediately draws his weapon and returns fire with 5 rounds. The suspect loses his balance, stumbles forward, and literally falls right at the feet of a dinner guest. 7 seconds. That is all it took for the entire protective apparatus to be pushed to its absolute breaking point.
And what happens in the immediate aftermath here is absolutely crucial. When the suspect hit the ground unharmed and dropped his weapon, a dinner guest, Navy veteran Aaron Thaman, looked down the corridor. He noticed that those double ballroom doors were wide open. That meant there was a direct, clear line of sight from the hallway straight to the president and the entire line of succession. So Thaman immediately sprints down and personally yanks those doors shut, neutralizing that critical vulnerability while the agents swarmed the suspect.
Section 5. Assessing the security failure. Aftermath and investigations.
So now that the dust has somewhat settled on those chaotic 7 seconds, how are the agencies handling the fallout? Well, we're seeing 2 very different public reactions. On one side, Secret Service leadership is essentially stating that at the end of the day, their safety net worked. They're pointing out that the suspect was stopped about 20 feet inside the perimeter with more than a dozen agents between him and the ballroom doors. But on the flip side, the White House is acknowledging a harsh reality. With this being the 3rd major assassination attempt on President Trump in just 2 years, they've stated that improvements may be considered. The Secret Service is currently doing a full mission review to figure out exactly what broke down.
In the meantime, the broader investigations and political fallout are absolutely in full swing. The FBI is running a full forensic review of the suspect's devices over at Quantico, and he's facing incredibly grave federal charges. On the political front, there is a bipartisan consensus that heated rhetoric is inspiring this kind of violence. But of course, both sides are pointing fingers and blaming the other for creating that environment in the first place. And unsurprisingly, the internet is already churning out completely unfounded conspiracy theories, claiming the whole event was staged. To navigate all of this moving forward, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles is actively leading an internal review of the attack, trying to balance keeping the president safe with his desire to keep attending these large public events.
We've seen how an incredibly patient actor with a spotless record completely dismantled a static security protocol just by checking into a hotel one day early. The concentric circles of security failed because they were entirely focused on the outside world, while the real threat was sleeping up on the 10th floor. So, I'll leave you with this question. As our physical and political threat environments continue to evolve at lightning speed, how do we successfully protect a target when the threat is already inside the perimeter? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.